So, just close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a giant stone castle standing tall on a hill, surrounded by thick fog in the early morning. There's a bitter chill in the air, and the only sound you hear is the clinking of metal as someone walks across the cobblestone courtyard. This is not a fairy tale. This is a real place, a real time. And you, well, you're not a knight, not a noble, not even a squire. You're one of the many invisible people who made this entire thing work. You're a servant. Now, when most people think of castles, they think of grand halls, roaring fireplaces, giant feasts, velvet gowns, and shiny armor. But for you, none of that matters. You won't be eating at those feasts. You'll be serving them. You won't be wearing anything velvet, and you definitely won't be warming your hands by the big fire. Instead, you'll be scrubbing pots, fetching firewood, and hoping to grab a crust of bread before you collapse on a straw mat for a few hours of sleep. Being a servant in a medieval castle wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even decent. It was exhausting, filthy, cold, and cruel. It was a life of obedience, silence, and endless work. You weren't there to have an opinion. You weren't there to be seen. You were there to serve, and you had no choice but to accept that. Most likely, you were born into it. Your parents might have been servants too. Maybe they worked in the stables, or the kitchens, or cleaned chamber pots. And now it's your turn. You probably started working when you were barely 10 years old, maybe even younger. You learned fast because mistakes weren't tolerated. A broken dish could mean no dinner. A late errand could mean a beating and speaking out of turn. You learned not to as you start your day. Probably before the sun's even up, your body is already sore. Your hands are cracked from the cold, and your back aches from sleeping on a sack of straw that hasn't been changed in weeks. You get up not because you want to, but because you have to. If you're not in the kitchen or in the halls by the time the noble family wakes, you'll answer for it. And the punishment won't just be words. You walk past the massive stone walls that always seem to trap the cold inside. You avoid eye contact with the guards. You keep your head down. You know your place. And as you pass by the tapestries and torches, you try not to admire them. Admiring is dangerous. It leads to dreaming, and dreaming leads to disappointment. There's no such thing as privacy here. No such thing as rest. Even when you're not working, you're expected to be ready to work. Your job is never really done, and you're never thanked. You're not praised for polishing a dozen candlesticks or scrubbing the soot off a fireplace. That's just expected. That's your life. Still, despite all this, you keep going. Maybe it's out of fear. Maybe it's out of habit. Maybe it's because you don't know any other way to live. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a tiny flicker of pride in you, knowing that even if no one notices, without you, this place wouldn't function. The fires wouldn't burn, the food wouldn't be served, and the nobles wouldn't enjoy their lives nearly as much. But that thought is brief, and it quickly fades as you feel the cold seeping through your worn shoes. You hear the call of the head servant echo down the corridor, and your day begins. Another day in the shadow of the castle. Another day as a servant. Another day of pure, quiet misery. Asterisk, you didn't exactly choose this life. Nobody really does. Becoming a servant in a medieval castle wasn't like applying for a job. There were no interviews, no choices, no contracts. For most people, it simply happened. You were born into poverty, or into a family that already worked in service, and that was it. Your fate was sealed before you could even speak your first words. Some people became servants because their families owed debts. Maybe your father borrowed money during a harsh winter, or your village had a bad harvest, and now the debt had to be paid. But money was rare, so instead, families paid with what they had, their labor, and sometimes that meant you'd be handed over to a lord's household, and your family would hope that, at the very least, you'd have food in your belly and a roof over your head. Not much of a comfort, but for many, it was better than starving. Then there were orphans. So many children lost their parents to disease, war, famine, or all three. With nowhere to go, they were often taken in by wealthy households, not out of kindness, but out of opportunity. A small child was perfect for running errands, cleaning floors, lighting candles, or slipping through narrow spaces to carry messages. You didn't need much space to sleep, and you definitely didn't need payment, just a little food, and you were expected to be grateful, and some were taken as punishment. Maybe your village rebelled against taxes. Maybe someone in your family angered the wrong noble. As a result, you might be forced into service as a warning to others, a way to break your spirit and keep you under control. And so, you'd find yourself waking up one morning in your home and falling asleep that night in a cold, unfamiliar corner of a stone castle, listening to voices you didn't recognize and being told what to do by people you'd never met. No matter how you arrived, one thing became clear right away. This was your new life, and it wasn't temporary. You didn't work here for a while before moving on to something better. There was nothing better. Most servants didn't leave unless they were forced out from sickness or age, or unless they died on the job, which happened more often than anyone wanted to admit. And you weren't considered a guest or a visitor. You weren't one of the family. You were at the very bottom of the ladder. There were nobles, knights, squires, and maybe even merchants or artists who visited. Then there were the household managers and skilled workers like cooks or blacksmiths. And then, far below, there was you, the invisible servant, the one who cleaned up the mess, carried the loads, and got none of the credit. Your training didn't involve books or classrooms. You learned by watching, by listening, and by being yelled at. If you didn't know how to do something, someone would show you once. After that, you were expected to do it perfectly every time. Mistakes weren't tolerated. A wrong move with a noble's clothing, or dropping a dish, or forgetting a command could mean days without food, a harsh punishment, or worse. And even if you were young, even if you were scared or overwhelmed, there was no patience for weakness. Crying was useless. Complaining was dangerous. You had to learn fast, keep quiet, and blend in. Being noticed usually meant trouble. So your best option was to be invisible, to move quickly and silently, to never speak unless spoken to, and to always bow your head. The clothes you were given were plain, itchy, and rarely washed, handmade from other servants, or rough fabrics sewn together without care. Your feet might go weeks without decent shoes. In cold weather, your fingers would go numb while you worked. But still, you did what was asked, because if you didn't, someone else would, and you'd be punished or replaced in an instant. Sometimes, if you showed promise, if you were quick, clever, and didn't make waves, you might get promoted to a slightly better position. Maybe you'd work indoors more often, Maybe you'd serve food in the great hall instead of scrubbing pots. Maybe you'd help in the Lord's chamber. But even then, your life was still hard. It just meant slightly less filth and slightly more pressure. But let's be honest. For most servants, there was no promotion, no recognition, just endless repetition. Washing clothes, hauling water, cleaning chambers, serving meals, sweeping floors, lighting candles, running errands, and doing it all again. The next day, and the next, until your body gave out, or the castle no longer needed you. Still, for many, being a servant was the only way to survive. There was food, however meager, there was shelter, however cold, and in a world where disease, war, and hunger waited outside the castle gates, sometimes survival was all that mattered. So no, you didn't dream of being a servant. But once you were one, you learned quickly that dreaming was a dangerous luxury. The sooner you accepted your place, the easier it was to get through each day. And if you were lucky, maybe one day you'd earn a little trust, maybe even a few kind words. But until then, your life was one of service, unseen, unheard, but always working. Your first day in the castle doesn't feel real. It's overwhelming in a way that's hard to explain. The walls are taller than anything you've ever seen, and everything smells like stone, wood smoke, and sweat. You keep your head down, partly out of fear, partly because you're trying not to stare. Everything is too big, too cold, too loud, and you're too small. The head servant barks orders before you've even fully stepped inside. You're shown a narrow corridor where the other servants sleep, if you can even call it sleeping. It's not a room, really, more like a cold passageway with bundles of straw and worn-out cloth where people collapse for a few hours at night. The walls drip with dampness. There's no fire to warm the place, no privacy, no comfort. Someone pushes a bundle of rags into your arms, your uniform, if you can call it that. It smells like it's never been washed. It's rough against your skin, and it's already worn thin at the elbows. There's no ceremony, no welcome, just work. Always work. You're immediately put to task. No explanation. Just follow what the others are doing and try not to fall behind. You watch as older servants scrub floors on their hands and knees, haul heavy buckets of water up and down steep stone stairs, and shuffle silently through halls, carrying trays piled high with food. You won't get to eat. You don't know where anything is, and no one has time to help you. You'll learn, or you won't. That's how it works. Your first job is to help in the scullery, the lowest part of the kitchen. It's hot, dark, and filled with smoke. You're handed a stack of greasy dishes and shown a barrel of freezing water. You wash, scrub, rinse, scrub again, over and over. There's no stool to sit on, no gloves to protect your hands, just the sting of cold water and the endless sound of clinking plates. The scullery maid beside you is no older than 12, and she doesn't speak. She just works, head down, eyes blank. By the end of your first hour, your fingers are raw and your back is aching. No one notices. That's normal here. Then there's the silence, not peaceful silence, but the kind that sits heavy in the air. Servants don't talk unless they have to, and if they do, they whisper. Speaking out loud can get you in trouble. Jokes are dangerous. Laughter is rare. Everything is quiet unless someone of higher rank is yelling, and yelling happens a lot. The castle itself is nothing like you imagined. Yes, it's grand in places. The great hall has high ceilings, massive tapestries, and a long wooden table where the nobles eat, but you're not welcome there, not unless you're cleaning or serving. You'll spend most of your time in the darker places, the kitchens, the stairwells, the cellars, places that always feel cold, always smell bad, and never seem to get any light. You're not allowed to look nobles in the eye. If one walks past you, you step aside and lower your gaze. You learn quickly not to speak unless spoken to. Even then, your answers must be short and respectful. Yes, my lord. At once, my lady. You practice these in your head. They become automatic. And then there are the rules. So many rules. Don't speak during meals. Don't eat in front of guests. Don't leave your post unless you're told. Don't be seen wandering. Don't drop anything. Don't spill anything. Don't question an order. Don't answer back. Every mistake is noticed. Every misstep is remembered. You also notice how tired everyone looks. Not just the older servants, but the young ones too. They move like ghosts, silently, without joy. It's like they've already accepted their fate. You wonder if you'll end up the same. You wonder how long it'll take before your own spirit begins to fade. The smells are hard to handle at first. In the kitchens, it's a mix of old grease, rotting vegetables, and meat that's been left out too long. In the chambers, it's perfume trying to cover sweat and sickness. In the hallways, it's smoke from the torches and the unwashed bodies of dozens of people living on top of each other. You try not to wrinkle your nose. You'll get used to it, they say. And the cold, it's everywhere. The stone walls, never. Warm up, no matter how many fires are lit. The windows, if there are any, don't keep out the wind. At night, your teeth chatter so loud, you're afraid you'll wake someone. But no one complains, because complaining won't change anything. You just pull your thin blanket tighter and hope morning comes quickly. Then there are the injuries. Burned hands from hot pans, splinters from broken crates, slips on wet stone steps. You see a boy no older than 10 fall while carrying a heavy pot. It spills everywhere. The head cook slaps him hard across the face. He doesn't cry. He just nods and starts cleaning. You watch and realize something deep in your stomach. Kindness is a luxury here. The truth is, no one really cares how you feel. You're here to do your job. If you're sad, tired, hurt, or scared, you keep it to yourself. You learn fast, or you get left behind, and no one waits for you to catch up. At the end of your first day, your body feels broken. You want to cry, but even that feels like wasted energy. You lie down on the scratchy straw, still wearing the same dirty clothes you started the day in. Your stomach growls, but you didn't get much to eat, just a bit of bread and some thin soup, if you were lucky. But sleep doesn't come easy. You think about your home, your family, the world outside, the castle walls. You wonder if they miss you. You wonder if they even had a choice in sending you here. You wonder how many years of this you'll have to endure. The fire in your chest, the one that still hopes, still dreams, it flickers just a little less brightly. You tell yourself you'll get through tomorrow. You have to, because here, that's all you can do. Survive one day at a time, and maybe one day you'll feel less like a stranger. Maybe one day this cold, cruel place will stop feeling like a punishment. But not today. Today, You're just another servant, pair of hands in a castle that never sleeps. The day doesn't start with sunlight, it starts in darkness. Long before the sun touches the towers of the castle, a bell rings somewhere deep in the stone walls, low and cold, like a warning. That's your cue. You stir from the thin pile of straw you call a bed, your bones aching from the hard floor and your limbs stiff with cold. You blink slowly in the dark, trying to remember where you are, what day it is, what time it might be. But in a castle like this, time doesn't belong to you. You swing your legs out and stand. No time to stretch, no time to gather your thoughts. If you're lucky, you slept in the corridor with the other lower servants, the scullions, the hall boys, the chambermaids. If not, maybe you were on a rush mat in the corner of the kitchen, curled up near the embers of yesterday's fire, stealing warmth while no one was looking. Doesn't matter now. You're up. The day has begun. The first task, fire. You're responsible for starting fires in the coldest, darkest parts of the castle, places that feel more like caves than living spaces. It's not as easy as striking a match. You carry bundles of wood and armfuls of kindling up slippery stairs, balancing heavy iron tools with shaking hands. Your fingers go numb, your knees buckle under the weight, but you keep moving. One room, then another, then another. By the time the first bit of gray light creeps through the high slits of the castle walls, the fires are burning. You don't get to stand by them. You don't get to warm your hands. You move on, always moving. Next, the water, buckets and buckets of it. Water to wash the stone floors. Water for the laundry. Water for the kitchens. There's no tap, no pump, no shortcut. You carry it by hand, fetched from the well or a stream nearby if you're unlucky. The buckets are heavy, and the handles dig into your palms until the skin splits. You try not to spill any, not just because of the mess, but because every drop is precious. If you're a kitchen servant, your next hours are swallowed by food, not eating it, of course, but preparing it for those who will. You clean root vegetables with freezing water, slice onions until your eyes burn, and pluck chickens with sticky hands that sting from the cuts on your fingers. You tend the fires that heat the massive cauldrons. You stir thick, bubbling stews until your arms ache. You turn spits with whole animals roasting slowly over flames. You smell everything, but you taste nothing. If you're a chambermaid, your day is filled with messes. Nobles may dress in fine silks, but they leave trails of filth wherever they go. You empty chamber pots, and the smell alone is enough to make you dizzy. You scrub stains from mattresses, sweep piles of hair and dirt from stone floors, and haul linen to be washed in cold streams, then dried over smoky fires. There is no end to the cleaning, no moment when you can say, that's done. Dirt comes back, always. If you serve in the great hall, you're expected to move like air, quietly, efficiently, and invisibly. You polish the long wooden table until it shines, arrange heavy chairs, set out goblets, plates, and trenchers. You fetch wine, bread, dried meats, fresh fruit, if there is any. You stand at attention while the nobles dine, ready to refill or replace anything without being asked. You don't look at them, you don't speak, you simply move like part of the furniture. Throughout the day, bells ring, footsteps echo, commands fly. You're sent here, then there, then back again. You fetch scrolls, deliver messages, light torches, sweep staircases, brush horse manure from the courtyard. You don't get to question why. You don't ask for breaks. The moment you stop moving, someone notices. And when someone notices, trouble follows. At midday, if there's time and if someone remembers, you might be allowed to eat a piece of coarse bread, maybe a turnip or a spoonful of broth. You eat quickly, not because you're greedy, but because the work doesn't stop. You eat with your hands, sitting on a cold step or a damp floor, surrounded by others just as exhausted and hungry as you. No one talks much. Talking takes energy, and energy is something you have to ration. As the day wears on, your tasks repeat: cleaning, carrying, scrubbing, sweeping, lifting, obeying. The castle is like a machine, and you're just a cog, small, replaceable, expected to turn without complaint. If you're assigned to the laundry, your hands stay raw from soap made of ash and animal fat. You beat clothing on rocks, rinse them in icy water, wring them out with aching wrists. The laundry never ends. Nobles wear multiple layers, and they expect clean clothes every day, sometimes twice a day. You try not to fall behind, because once you do, it's nearly impossible to catch up later in the afternoon. If there's a hunt or a feast, everything becomes more frantic. More guests, more food, more mess. You carry trays too big for your arms. You scrub goblets until they shine. You stand perfectly still for hours, waiting for a nod or a glance that sends you running to fetch something you don't even understand. You do all of it with tired legs, sore feet, and a back that feels like it might break. And yet, somehow, you keep going. When the sun finally begins to set, casting long orange shadows across the gray walls, the work doesn't end. Now it's time to clean up. You gather bones from the feast, mop up spilled wine, collect used plates, and scrape leftover food into slop buckets for the pigs. You sweep ash from fireplaces and relight torches. You prepare the chambers for night-smoothing beds you'll never sleep in, airing out rooms you're not allowed to rest in. Only then, when the nobles retreat to their rooms and the castle grows quieter, do you begin to slow down. You return to your corner, your corridor, your bundle of straw. You take off your apron, rinse your hands in cold water, and lie down. No pillow, no comfort, just the sound of others breathing, snoring, or whispering softly in the dark. You think of home if you had one. You think of tomorrow and whether it will be better or worse. Most likely, it will be the same. You stare at the ceiling, your eyes burning. You tell yourself you survived another day. That's what it means to live here. Not to enjoy, not to grow, just to survive, one day at a time, until your body gives out or someone replaces you. This is the rhythm of castle life for a servant, from darkness to darkness, from silence to silence. No applause, no reward, no rest, just the sound of the morning bell echoing again, reminding you that it's time to begin all over again. The day doesn't start with sunlight. It starts in darkness. Long before the sun touches the towers of the castle, a bell rings somewhere deep in the stone walls, low and cold, like a warning. That's your cue. You stir from the thin pile of straw you call a bed, your bones aching from the hard floor and your limbs stiff with cold. You blink slowly in the dark, trying to remember where you are. what day it is, what time it might be. But in a castle like this, time doesn't belong to you. You swing your legs out and stand. No time to stretch, no time to gather your thoughts. If you're lucky, you slept in the corridor with the other lower servants, the scullions, the hallboys, the chambermaids. If not, maybe you were on a rush mat in the corner of the kitchen, curled up near the embers of yesterday's fire, stealing warmth while no one was looking. Doesn't matter now. You're up. The day has begun. The first task: fire. You're responsible for starting fires in the coldest, darkest parts of the castle, places that feel more like caves than living spaces. It's not as easy as striking a match. You carry bundles of wood. Your fingers go numb, your knees buckle under the weight, but you keep moving. One room, then another, then another. By the time the first bit of gray light creeps through the high slits of the castle walls, the fires are burning. You don't get to stand by them. You don't get to warm your hands. You move on, always moving. Next, the water, buckets and buckets of it. Water to wash the stone floors, water for the laundry, water for the kitchens. There's no tap, no pump, no shortcut. You carry it by hand, fetched from the well or a stream nearby if you're unlucky. The buckets are heavy, and the handles dig into your palms until the skin splits. You try not to spill any, not just because of the mess, but because every drop is precious. If you're a kitchen servant, your next hours are swallowed by food, not eating it, of course, but preparing it for those who will. You clean root vegetables with freezing water, slice onions until your eyes burn, and pluck chickens with sticky hands that sting from the cuts on your fingers. You tend the fires that heat the massive cauldrons. You stir thick, bubbling stews until your arms ache. You turn spits with whole animals roasting slowly over flames. You smell everything, but you taste nothing. If you're a chambermaid, your day is filled with messes. Nobles may dress in fine silks, but they leave trails of filth wherever they go. You empty chamber pots, and the smell alone is enough to make you dizzy. You scrub stains from mattresses, sweep piles of hair and dirt from stone floors, and haul linen to be washed in cold streams, then dried over smoky fires. There is no end to the cleaning, no moment when you can say, "That's done." Dirt comes back always. If you serve in the great hall, you're expected to move like air, quietly, efficiently, and invisibly. You polish the long wooden table until it shines, arrange heavy chairs, set out goblets, plates, and trenchers. You fetch wine, bread, dried meats, fresh fruit, if there is any. You stand at attention while the nobles dine, ready to refill or replace anything without being asked. You don't look at them, you don't speak, you simply move, like part of the furniture. Throughout the day, bells ring, footsteps echo, commands fly. You're sent here, then there, then back again. You fetch scrolls, deliver messages, light torches, sweep staircases, brush horse manure from the courtyard. You don't get to question why. You don't ask for breaks. The moment you stop moving, someone notices. And when someone notices, trouble follows. At midday, if there's time, and if someone remembers, you might be allowed to eat a piece of coarse bread, maybe a turnip or a spoonful of broth. You eat quickly, not because you're greedy, but because the work doesn't stop. You eat with your hands, sitting on a cold step or a damp floor, surrounded by others, just as exhausted and hungry as you. No one talks much. Talking takes energy, and energy is something you have to ration. As the day wears on, your tasks repeat. Cleaning, carrying, scrubbing, sweeping, lifting, obeying. The castle is like a machine, and you're just a cog, small, replaceable, expected to turn without complaint. If you're assigned to the laundry, your hands stay raw from soap made of ash and animal fat. You beat clothing on rocks, rinse them in icy water, wring them out with aching wrists. The laundry never ends. Nobles wear multiple layers, and they expect clean clothes every day, sometimes twice a day. You try not to fall behind, because once you do, it's nearly impossible to catch up later in the afternoon. If there's a hunt or a feast, everything becomes more frantic. More guests, more food, more mess. You carry trays too big for your arms. You scrub goblets until they shine. You stand perfectly still for hours, waiting for a nod or a glance that sends you running to fetch something you don't even understand. You do all of it with tired legs, sore feet, and a back that feels like it might break. And yet, somehow, you keep going when the sun finally begins to set, casting long orange shadows across the gray walls. The work doesn't end. Now it's time to clean up. You gather bones from the feast, mop up spilled wine, collect used plates, and scrape leftover food into slop buckets for the pigs. You sweep ash from fireplaces and relight torches. You prepare the chambers for night-smoothing beds you'll never sleep in, airing out rooms you're not allowed to rest in. Only then, when the nobles retreat to their rooms and the castle grows quieter, do you begin to slow down. You return to your corner, your corridor, your bundle of straw. You take off your apron, rinse your hands in cold water, and lie down. No pillow, no comfort, just the sound of others breathing, snoring, or whispering softly in the dark. You think of home, if you had one. You think of tomorrow, and whether it will be better or worse. Most likely, it will be the same. You stare at the ceiling, your eyes burning. You tell yourself you survived another day. That's what it means to live here. Not to enjoy, not to grow, just to survive, one day at a time, until your body gives out or someone replaces you. This is the rhythm of castle life for a servant. From darkness to darkness, from silence to silence. No applause, no reward, no rest. Just the sound of the morning bell echoing again, reminding you that it's time to begin all over again. There's a certain way you have to carry yourself when you're in the presence of your masters. You learn it fast, or you pay the price. You don't speak unless spoken to. You never, ever interrupt. And whatever your personal thoughts are, you bury them deep, because in the castle, power is everything, and the masters have all of it. The nobles walk through the halls like they own the world, because, in a way, they do. They wear fine clothes made of wool, fur, or even silk, while you wear the same rough tunic every day. Their hands are soft. Yours are cracked and blistered. They eat the best food, sleep in warm beds, and enjoy music, hunting, and storytelling by firelight. You don't, and still, every day, you serve them. You make their beds, you light their fires, you draw their bathwater, you clean their boots and carry their messages. You help them dress, fetch their forgotten items, and sometimes even listen when they feel like talking. But you're not a friend. You're not even a person to them most of the time. You're a tool, a body, a pair of hands there to make their lives easier. Some lords and ladies are colder than the stone walls that surround you. They look right through you when they speak, like you're not even there. They don't learn your name. They don't thank you. They don't even acknowledge that you have thoughts or feelings of your own. They simply expect you to do what you're told, and to do it fast. Others, strangely, are kinder. Maybe not friendly exactly, but less cruel. They'll nod as you pass or ask if you've eaten, even if they don't do anything about it. And every once in a while, you meet one who truly sees you. They know your name. They remember it. They ask how your family is, even if they don't know where your family lives. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it sticks with you. Still, you never forget the rules. Even a kind master is still your master. Their mood can shift in an instant. One wrong move, one poorly timed word, and everything changes. The relationship is not equal. It never will be. If they're in a bad mood, you're the one who suffers. If they're bored, you might be the target of mockery. If they're angry, you might be punished for something that wasn't even your fault. And the punishments can be harsh. A broken plate, a spilled drink, a wrinkled garment. Things that seem small, tiny even, can bring down a world of trouble. A public scolding, a slap, a day without food, extra duties, and worst of all, the disappointment in their eyes. Like your mistake means you're less than human. But the strange thing is, you don't just fear them, you rely on them. Their mood, their favor, their opinion of you, it shapes your whole life. A good word from a noble could mean a lighter task or a safer post inside the castle. A bad one could ruin everything. So you listen carefully. You anticipate their needs before they say them. You try to be invisible when they're angry and useful when they're content. There are times, though, when that line blurs. Sometimes, late at night, a noble might pull you aside, not to command you, but to talk. Maybe they've had too much wine. Maybe they're lonely. Maybe they just want someone to hear them without judgment. And in those moments, when they speak to you like an equal, like a human being, it's almost worse than the usual distance, because it reminds you of everything you can't have, everything you'll never be. And sometimes, things get even more complicated. Servants are always around, always nearby, dressing, bathing, and assisting their masters in the most private parts of their lives. And in some cases, that leads to abuse. Things that aren't spoken of out loud. Power can twist people. And when someone can control every part of your life, including your body, you learn to keep your head down even more. Still. Even with all that, you do what you must. You learn how to read their faces, how to predict their moods. You memorize their habits, their favorites, their rules. You master the art of silence, of efficiency, of not being noticed, except when being noticed is exactly what they want. Because, at the end of the day, the castle runs on this fragile relationship. The nobles need you, even if they'll never say it. Their comfort depends on your exhaustion. Their feasts depend on your labor. Their power depends on your obedience. You're in the background, yes, but without you, their perfect world would start to fall apart. They don't see it that way, of course. They think they're above you in every way, but deep down, you know the truth. Behind every grand title, every fine robe, every ringed finger pointing in command, there's someone who can't make their own bed, or light their own fire, or cook their own food. And you can do all that and more. Not that it changes anything. You're still a servant. they're still your masters. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, that truth gives you just a little bit of strength, a little bit of pride, a reason to get through the next day. Not every servant in the castle did the same job. Just like the nobles had their ranks, kings, lords, knights, and ladies, servants were divided too. Everyone had a role, a task, a corner of the castle that belonged to them, even if only in the sense of work. And depending on your position, your daily life could look very different. But make no mistake, every role was hard, every position demanding, and none of it came with comfort or praise. If you were assigned to the kitchens, your days started earlier than almost anyone else. Before the sky even began to pale, you were already up and moving. The kitchen was the heart of the castle's operation. Always hot, always noisy, always moving. You didn't have time to sit, and you certainly didn't have time to make mistakes. Your job might be preparing ingredients, chopping roots, peeling vegetables, grinding herbs with a stone. Or maybe you were on fire duty, stoking the ovens, feeding logs to the massive hearths that roared all day. Sometimes you were responsible for stirring the great pots, so large you needed both hands to hold the paddle, keeping stews and broths from burning. You might be the one who turned the spit, slowly, for hours, making sure the meat cooked evenly. The heat from the flames would blister your skin, the smoke would sting your eyes, and the smell of grease would cling to your clothes no matter how many times you washed them clean up. Was another endless task. Piles of greasy pots, soot-covered pans, and cracked jugs. You scrubbed them with cold water and coarse cloth, scraping with your fingernails when the grime wouldn't budge. Sometimes you even boiled sand into the mix to scour them clean. Worked surrounded by shouting cooks, barking orders, and the constant, heavy pressure to go faster. If you were lucky, you might be promoted to a cook's assistant or eventually a kitchen boy or girl, which meant a little more responsibility and a little more trust. But it also meant more chances to be blamed when something went wrong. The kitchen had no room for errors. If a noble's food was late or undercooked or didn't look pretty enough, even if it wasn't your fault, you were the one who got punished. If you weren't in the kitchen, you might have worked in the chambers, the private rooms of the noble family. That job required a different kind of focus. Less brute strength, more precision. You cleaned, tidied, folded, fluffed, swept, and polished. You laid out clothes for the lords and ladies, careful to remember what color they wore on what day, which ring went with which robe, what perfume or hair oil they preferred. You had to move quietly. Nobles often slept late or napped in the day, and you were expected to work around them without disturbing them. That meant no loud footsteps, no dropped buckets, no coughing. You learned to hold in sneezes, to whisper when speaking, and to walk as softly as a cat. If you were very trusted, you might be allowed to help them dress, bathe, or brush their hair, but only under close supervision. Even a glance out of place could ruin your entire future in the castle. Working in the chambers meant dealing with personal items, their undergarments, their bed linens, even their chamber pots. The smell, the mess, the awkwardness, you dealt with it all without showing emotion. Nobles didn't want to see your discomfort. Your job was to make their lives feel effortless, clean, and controlled, even if everything behind the scenes was chaos. Then there were the hall servants, the ones who worked in the great hall, where meals, ceremonies, and social events took place. Hall work was about posture, timing, and silence. You stood straight, you didn't slouch, you moved, only when told. You memorized the seating arrangements, who got what dish first, which guest needed more wine, which lord never drank ale. You anticipated needs before they were spoken, and you never made a mess. Carrying trays was harder than it looked. They were heavy, unbalanced, and usually full of fragile plates or goblets. One slip, one clatter, and the whole hall would go silent. Eyes would turn, and you'd feel your heart drop into your stomach, because you knew what would come next. A shout, maybe a slap, maybe worse. So you walked slowly but steadily, trying not to shake, trying not to sweat too much. And all the while, you told yourself, don't drop it, don't trip, don't fall. You also had to know how to serve. Not just bring the food, but how to bring it, which hand to use, when to bow, how to back away from a table without turning your back. There were rules, hundreds of them, and no one ever wrote them down for you. You learned by watching, by being corrected, and by remembering. And then there were errand boys and messengers, always running through the halls, up the towers, across the courtyards. If that was your role, your job was to be fast. You carried notes, verbal messages, orders from one part of the castle to another. You ran in the rain, in the snow, across slippery stones and narrow staircases, careful not to drop anything or forget a word. Your legs burned constantly, your feet blistered, but you kept going because stopping meant punishment. Some servants worked in the laundry, which meant hauling baskets of wet clothes up and down stairs, scrubbing stains out with ash and soap, then hanging the garments to dry over smoky fires or outside in the wind. Wet cloth was heavy, and your arms always ached. The laundry rooms smelled of damp cloth, sour sweat, and burning wood. And since nobles changed clothes often, your work never ever ended. If you were assigned to the stables, your day began before dawn with feeding the horses, mucking out stalls, carrying heavy sacks of oats, brushing coats, and cleaning hooves. It was cold, dirty work, and dangerous. A single kick or a scared animal could leave you bruised or worse, but at least it got you out of the castle walls for a little while. Sometimes that alone was worth it. And then there were those assigned to the gardens or grounds, the ones who dug, planted, trimmed, and hauled. You worked in the rain, under the sun, and through the frost. No one paid attention unless something looked wrong. It was silent work, mostly. Some found peace in it. Others found only aching backs and sunburned skin. Despite all the different roles, one thing remained the same for everyone. You were always on duty. Whether you served food, cleaned rooms, tended fires, or ran errands, your time didn't belong to you. The castle owned your hours, your effort, your body, your silence. There was no glory in any of these jobs. No matter how well you did them, you rarely heard thank you. If you did, it stayed with you for days because it was so rare. Most of the time, the only reward was not being yelled at, not being punished. That became enough. But still, within all these tasks, you found a rhythm. You memorized the creaks in the floor, the ways the fire cracked, the times of day the light hit certain windows. You learned to move in sync with the castle, like a shadow, like a whisper. You knew where to be, what to do, how to disappear, when needed, and reappear when summoned. Every servant, no matter their station, carried the castle on their back. Without them, the fires wouldn't burn, the floors wouldn't shine, the nobles wouldn't dine, and the guests wouldn't marvel. The castle's grandeur was built on invisible hands, and you were one of them. The kitchen is the loudest, hottest, and most chaotic place in the entire castle. It's where the day truly begins and where it never seems to end. If you work here, you live in a world of constant noise, knives chopping, pots clanging, fires roaring, orders shouted across smoke-filled rooms. It's not just a room for cooking. It's a battlefield of heat and pressure, and you're right in the center of it. Your day starts before almost everyone else's, even before the sun has fully risen. The kitchen must be alive. The fires need to be lit, the bread dough prepared, the ovens stoked. It's cold when you wake up, but by the time you've finished your first task, you're sweating. The thick heat from the hearths wraps around you, choking and relentless. You learn quickly that there's no point in trying to stay clean. You'll be covered in soot, grease, flour, or ash by mid-morning anyway. The head cook runs the place like a military camp. They've likely worked in the castle for years, maybe even decades, and they don't tolerate laziness or mistakes. They know exactly how much meat is needed, which spices go into which dish, how long to roast a bird, and who among the staff is likely to mess it all up. You don't want to be the one who disappoints them. There's no quiet moment in the kitchen. Everyone is always moving. One person is peeling root vegetables. Another is plucking feathers from a freshly killed bird. Someone is stirring a bubbling cauldron with a wooden paddle taller than you. And in the corner, someone's kneeling by the fire, turning a spit so slowly and steadily, it looks like they're in a trance. The smells are overpowering, sometimes pleasant, fresh herbs, roasted garlic, baked bread, other times unbearable, boiling fat, spoiled milk, or animal blood. You get used to it in a strange way. Your nose dulls to the worst of it. You stop noticing the stink of sweat, the sourness of overripe vegetables, the sting of onion juice in your eyes. Food preparation is non-stop. Breakfast has to be ready before the nobles wake. That means gruel or porridge, warmed bread, maybe, dried fruit if the stores are full while they eat. You're already preparing lunch, cutting, chopping, boiling, mixing. Midday meals are larger, more elaborate, especially if there are guests. And before lunch is even served, you're thinking ahead to the evening feast. If there's a banquet, chaos takes on a new meaning. Meats need to be seasoned and roasted just right. Pies filled and sealed and glazed. Platters of fruit arranged perfectly. Sauces stirred constantly. And of course, everything must be hot when served. Even though the Great Hall is a 5-minute walk away through freezing corridors, that means timing is everything. One delay, one misstep, and the whole meal could be ruined. And if it's ruined, guess who's blamed? Not the nobles, not the lord of the castle. You. Then there's the cleaning. After every meal, you scrub everything. The counters, the knives, the pots, the floor. Grease collects on every surface. Ash coats your arms. Bits of food stick to your skin. Water is hauled in heavy buckets from the well. Soap is harsh and homemade, rough on your hands, but necessary to cut through the grime. And the leftovers. You don't eat them unless you're told you can. Some days, there's enough to share. Other days, everything is cleared away for the dogs or the pigs. If you're caught sneaking a bite, even just a corner of bread or a bit of stew, you're punished. Stealing food is one of the worst offenses. Even if you're starving, you have to pretend you're full. But food accidents happen. A plate drops, a dish burns, a sauce spills. The head cook shouts, maybe throws something. You freeze, you clean it fast, and you make sure it never happens again. In the kitchen, every mistake is visible. Every delay affects the rest of the castle. Even when the nobles are feasting, your work doesn't stop. You're preparing the next course, cleaning the last, fetching water, checking fires. And when they finally finish their meal and retreat to their chambers, you begin the final cleanup, a mountain of dishes, pans, bones, and waste. You scrape it all into buckets, scrub the surfaces, wipe down the knives, and bank the fires. For the night, you fall into bed, if you can call it that, smelling like grease and smoke. Your arms are sore from lifting. Your legs ache from standing. Your back feels like it might snap, but you did it. You survived another day. Working in the kitchen is one of the most demanding jobs in the castle. It's dirty, it's hot, it's relentless, but there's a strange rhythm to it, a pulse you learn to follow. You move from task to task without thinking. Your body memorizes the motions. Your hands know the tools. You don't need to speak much, you just do. And sometimes, just sometimes, there's pride. When a roast turns out perfectly, when the bread rises just right, when the nobles compliment the meal and the cook doesn't yell, you don't get the credit, of course. But in that moment, you know you were part of it. You helped make something good, something beautiful. Even if it lasted only an hour. That's the life of a kitchen servant. Hard, exhausting, thankless, but full of motion, of smells, of sound and fire. The heart of the castle beats in that hot, smoky room, and you're the one who keeps it alive. Let's talk about how you looked, or rather, how you were allowed to look. Because in a medieval castle, your appearance wasn't about self-expression. It was about function, rank, and the brutal reality of what you could afford, which, as a servant, wasn't much at all. Your clothing was simple, worn, and practical, because it had to be. You wore the same rough tunic or dress every day, made from coarse wool or linen, usually in dull, natural colors like brown, gray, or off-white. Bright dyes were expensive. Soft fabrics were a luxury, and fine tailoring. That was for nobles, not people like you, most likely. You had only 1 or 2 outfits, one for daily labor, and maybe another slightly cleaner one for special occasions, like a festival or religious service. Your clothes were patched and mended, again and again, passed down from others, stitched by hand in the corners of dark rooms when you had a moment to spare. There were no buttons or zippers. Your clothes were tied with belts, strings, or pins. You wore woolen hose if you had them, though they were itchy and often full of holes, and coarse undergarments that chafed your skin after a long day. Shoes, if you had a pair, they were made of stiff leather or wood, heavy and uncomfortable. If you didn't, you went barefoot, even in the cold. Washing clothes was an ordeal. The laundry room, if the castle had one, was usually a cold, damp place near a stream or water source. You scrubbed clothes on wooden boards, beat them against stones, and boiled them in water mixed with ash or lye soap, which burned your hands if you weren't careful. Afterward, you dried them over smoky fires or hung them outside, hoping it wouldn't rain. But washing yourself, that was a whole different problem. There were no showers, no private bathrooms, and certainly no hot water on demand. Full baths were rare, and for a servant, they were almost unheard of. If you were lucky, you might wash your face and hands in a cold basin at the start or end of the day. Maybe rinse your feet after trudging through mud. But a full body wash, that might happen once a week, maybe once a month, depending on the castle, the season, and how dirty your job was. The truth is, the castle smelled, people smelled, everything smelled. The mix of smoke, sweat, unwashed bodies, rotting food, animals, chamber pots, it filled the air and clung to everything. After a while, you stopped noticing. Your nose adapted, but the grime stayed on your skin, in your hair, under your fingernails. And it wasn't just unpleasant, it was dangerous. Lack of hygiene led to all kinds of health problems. Skin rashes, infections, lice, fleas, worms. You might get sores from chafing clothes or from sitting on damp stone floors. You might develop coughs that never fully went away, especially in the winter when the cold air made your chest burn. Toilets. Most castles had what were called garderobes, basically stone seats with holes that dropped waste into a pit or down the side of a wall. They stank badly. And if you didn't have time to reach one, or if you weren't allowed to leave your post, you used a chamber pot, a small bucket tucked under beds or behind doors. Guess who got to empty those? That's right, water was carried by hand, so it wasn't wasted on things like daily washing. Drinking water was often polluted, filled with bacteria from nearby animals, waste, or standing puddles. People drank weak ale instead, not because it tasted better, but because it was safer. Even that could make you sick if stored improperly. Illness spread fast in these conditions. You lived shoulder to shoulder with other servants, sharing mats, clothes, tools, air. If someone had a cough, everyone had a cough within days. If lice were in one mattress, they were soon in every corner of the servants' quarters. Fevers, stomach bugs, and infections were common. And when the cold months came, people died from pneumonia, from starvation, from the sheer exhaustion of living this life. There were no doctors for the poor. Maybe a wise woman with herbs, maybe a monk with a few remedies. But if your condition was serious, a bad wound, an infected tooth, a broken bone, you either healed slowly and painfully, or you didn't. Most servants didn't live long. If you made it to 40, you were considered old, and yet you kept working. You didn't stop because you couldn't. If you got sick, someone else took your job. If you couldn't move, someone else took your space. You didn't have the luxury of rest. So you dragged your aching body to the kitchens, to the chambers, to the stables, and you got on with it. Some days, you were lucky enough to warm your hands near the fire. Maybe you found a clean cloth to wipe your face. Maybe someone shared a sliver of soap or helped you pick nits from your hair. Small moments of relief, kindness, dignity. You didn't expect to feel clean. You just tried not to feel filthy. You didn't aim to look good, only to look decent enough not to be noticed by the wrong person. And you didn't dare complain, because everyone was in the same condition. Dirt, sweat, and sickness weren't signs of failure. They were just part of being a servant. But still, when you looked at the nobles, you noticed the difference. Their fine fabrics, their perfumed skin, their shining hair. They lived above the grime, above the stink, above the risk. Their world was made clean by the hard work of people like you. And so you learned to live in the dirt. You adapted. You endured. You didn't have soft hands, smooth skin, or polished shoes, but you had strength. And in a world that offered you so little, that strength was something no one could take away. There's a silence that falls over the castle at night. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, waiting kind. The kind of silence where you can hear every creak in the stone, every shift in the wind through the cracks in the walls, every breath of the servant sleeping next to you. That's when the fears creep in. Not just the fears of ghosts or monsters, but of things much closer, much more real. You lie in the dark, too tired to move, but too tense to sleep, and your mind begins to wander. What if you oversleep and miss your morning task? What if the fire doesn't catch fast enough? What if you drop a tray, or forget a message, or say the wrong thing in front of the wrong person? None of those are little mistakes, not in your world. In your world, the smallest slip could mean punishment, replacement, or even being cast out. The fear isn't loud, it's quiet. It hides in your chest and your stomach and your throat. You carry it with you like an invisible stone tied to your back. Every knock at the door, every shout down the hall, every sudden silence in the middle of the day, it makes your heart skip, makes your hands sweat, makes your breath catch. You've seen it happen to others. A kitchen boy who burned the bread and was beaten so badly he couldn't stand for days. A chambermaid who accidentally spilled oil on a lady's dress and was sent away. No explanation, no goodbyes. She just vanished. You never found out where she went. Then there are the bigger fears. Illness, injury, winter, you've heard. Stories of entire wings of castles falling sick, of fires that couldn't be controlled, of servants who slipped on icy steps and broke their backs, of frostbite that claimed fingers, of rats in the cellar spreading disease. You try not to think about those things, but at night, when it's quiet, they come back. And then there are the nobles themselves. Some of them are kind, or at least distant, but others, they're unpredictable. One moment smiling, the next screaming. You never know what will set them off. A wrinkled sheet, a forgotten cloak, a poorly timed question. And the more power they have, the more dangerous they become, because they can do anything, say anything, and no one will stop them. So yes, you're afraid, often, and if you say you're not, you're either lying or too tired to care anymore. But still, somehow, through all of that, there are moments, tiny, fragile moments of peace. Maybe it's the warmth of the kitchen just before the morning rush, when the fires are fresh and no one's yelling yet, or that first bite of bread after a long day, sitting in a quiet corner, the world finally still for a minute. Maybe it's a joke whispered between servants while scrubbing pots, or the brief smile from a cook who's usually too angry to notice you. Sometimes it's the view. Maybe you climb the stairs to deliver something and, just for a second, you glance out of a narrow castle window. The sun is setting. The fields stretch out beyond the walls. Birds drift lazily across the sky. You stand there, holding a tray, or a broom, or a bundle of clothes, and for just that moment, you feel something like calm. There are nights when you sleep so deeply, so completely, that even the fear can't find you. Nights when you dream of warmth, of laughter, of home, if you remember what that even feels like. And when you wake, there's a second where you don't remember where you are. You don't feel the weight of the castle yet. That second is precious. You live for those seconds, those stolen bits of peace, because even in a place ruled by power and hierarchy, even in a life defined by labor and silence, you're still human. You still hope, you still laugh, you still dream, and maybe, just maybe, that's what keeps you going. Asterisk, you don't have a name in the castle halls, not one that's used often anyway. To the nobles, your boy, or girl, or you there, sometimes just a gesture, a snap of fingers, a raised eyebrow. You exist to do, not to be. They don't ask where you're from, they don't wonder what you think. To them, you're part of the background, like the stone walls, the firewood, or the wind whistling through the windows, useful, necessary, but not worth noticing unless something goes wrong. When they look at you, they see only your role. The kitchen hand with greasy hair, the chambermaid with rough fingers, the stable boy who smells of hay. They don't imagine that you feel hunger or sadness or joy, and they certainly don't imagine that you see them, that you watch them laugh, fight, cry, and stumble, that you remember the secrets they let slip when they thought no one was listening. You've seen nobles at their best, generous, gracious, even gentle, but you've also seen them at their worst, cruel, petty, and self-indulgent, and you've learned that their favor is as fragile as spun glass. It shines for a moment and then shatters with the slightest pressure. Still, you play your part. You bow, you nod, you obey, because it's the only way to survive. But servants, we see each other. You know who always takes the heaviest load without complaint. You know who sneaks a bit of bread into someone's pocket when they think no one's looking. You know who hums while sweeping, who limps from an old injury, who cries quietly when they think everyone else is asleep. You see the chambermaid who works faster than anyone else, not because she loves the job, but because she's scared to be alone with the Lord, who lingers too long. You see the kitchen boy who never eats his full portion, saving half for his younger brother who works in the stables. You see the elderly washerwoman whose fingers are stiff with age, but still kneels on cold stone to scrub noble linens that will never touch her own skin. There's a quiet bond between you, unspoken but strong. You don't have time for long conversations or deep friendships, but you nod to each other in the hallway. You whisper warnings when the steward is in a foul mood. You share warmth when the nights are too cold. No one understands your life like another servant. No one else knows what it feels like to be invisible and yet completely necessary, to be exhausted and still keep going, to have dreams that you never say out loud. Sometimes you joke. You find little ways to make the work bearable. A funny face behind the cook's back, a ridiculous nickname for the Lord's hunting dog. Race to see who can peel the most potatoes before supper. Laughter is rare, but when it comes, it's gold. You celebrate small victories, a day without injury, a moment of rest in the sun, a kind word from someone who usually stays silent. These things might seem tiny to someone on the outside, but to you, they're everything. And when someone leaves, when they run away, or are dismissed, or simply vanish, you feel it, even if you barely spoke to them, because their absence is a reminder that this life is fragile, that any of you could be next. Sometimes you wonder how you're seen by the world beyond the castle. The travelers who pass through, the merchants who bring spices and stories from distant lands, the bards who sing of heroes and kings, but never of the hands that clean their armor or serve their meals. To them, you're just the help, a figure in the corner, a shadow in the hall. But you know better. You know how much strength it takes to carry on each day, to lift, to clean, to serve, to endure. You know how much discipline it takes to swallow your anger, your pain, your voice. And you know how much courage it takes to keep your dignity when no one offers you respect. So maybe you're not seen the way you should be. Maybe you're not remembered in songs or written into books. But among yourselves, the ones who truly know, there's a kind of silent honor, a deep respect, a shared truth, that even in a world built to ignore you, you see each other, and that makes all the difference. It's not the food, it's not the bed, it's not the hope of reward. What keeps you going is something smaller, quieter, something that doesn't have a name but lives deep in your chest like an ember that refuses to go out. Some mornings you wake up before the sun, your limbs aching and your stomach hollow, and you wonder, why am I still doing this? But then your feet hit the cold stone floor and you start moving, because movement means survival, and survival means one more day. You keep going because there's no choice. But that's not the whole truth. The truth is, you've found things to hold on to, small things that matter, even if the world says they don't. Maybe it's a kind word from someone who knows your name. Maybe it's the warmth of fresh bread in your hands before the nobles touch it. Maybe it's that one spot in the courtyard where the sun hits just right in the afternoon. Maybe it's the way the sky turns gold before night falls. Maybe it's pride, not the loud, boastful kind, but the kind that lives in your bones. The pride of doing something well, even when no one's watching. The pride of knowing you can carry more, last longer, move faster. The pride of being necessary in a world that pretends you're not. You keep going for the people beside you, the ones who share your burden, your silence, your story. You nod at them in the halls, pass tools back and forth in the kitchen, whisper warnings, offer scraps. You build something together that no noble will ever understand, a hidden network of care, of strength, of quiet resistance. Sometimes you keep going because of what you remember, a face from home, a voice that once told you you were strong, a promise you made to someone before you came here. You carry those memories like charms in your pocket, worn, faded, but powerful. And sometimes you keep going because of what you imagine, a better life, a day off, a home of your own. It may never come, but the thought of it gives you breath when everything else has been taken. You've learned to endure, to adapt, to disappear when needed, and to reappear stronger. You've mastered the art of survival in a place that was never built for you. What keeps you going? Not fear, not duty, not even hope, exactly. It's something deeper, a quiet refusal to give in, and now, as the torches burn low and the castle quiets, your eyes begin to close. You've walked through stone corridors, labored in smoky kitchens, bowed in silent chambers. You've felt the chill of early mornings, the sting of harsh words, and the steady weight of days that blur into nights. You've lived for a little while in the skin of someone unseen, Someone who worked so that others could feast, who endured so that others could thrive. And yet, in that life of silence and service, you found strength. The strength to wake up each day, to carry burdens without being asked. To hold your dignity even when no one offered you respect. Not every hero wears armor. Not every story is told in halls filled with songs. Some stories are quiet, whispered between servants, carried in calloused hands, etched into stone floors by the footsteps of those who came before. Tonight, you walked in those footsteps. You heard the kitchen fires crackle. You felt the weight of the chamber pot, the press of cold water on your skin, the ache in your shoulders after a day without rest. You heard the scoldings. You saw the glimmers of kindness. You felt the fear of being noticed and the deeper fear of being forgotten. But above all, you witnessed resilience, because even in the darkest corners of the castle, beneath the banquets, beyond the banners, there lived people who survived, people who mattered, just like you. So breathe deeply now. Let your mind drift beyond the castle walls. Let your thoughts soften, your breath slow, your body rest. You've carried enough for today. The stone floors will wait. The chores will wait. The voices and orders and footsteps and fires, they can all wait tonight. It's just you, safe, still, strong. Close your eyes. Sleep deeply. You've earned it. Asterisk.